Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Ann Minicozy, President of the Community Breakfast Collaborative. On behalf of Father Peter Donahue, the President of Villanova University, I want to welcome you to Villanova University. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Community Breakfast Collaborative, I want to welcome you to 2023 Undoing Racism Day in person and live streaming. Thank you all for being here. I want to extend a special welcome to all of our distinguished guests, which includes all of you. Before I don't see the catering and hospitality staff at Villanova, I want to recognize you because whenever we get to that part in the program, you all are on to, working on other things. So thank you so much for preparing the food and setting up the room and setting up the chairs and setting up the tables and the tablecloths. Really very much appreciated. So thank you so much. I'm glad I caught you all right at the beginning. Is Miss Debbie here? She's usually here every time. That'll be the first one that she's not here. I'll see her at another event. I want to extend a special welcome to my students. They are first-year Augustine and Culture Seminar students. And is it okay if you just give a wave at your tables? So everybody knows where you are, so they're spread out. And a special welcome to our 6 Radnor Middle School 8th grade students. If you could just give a wave where you are. All right, thank you. Yeah, we really want to have intergenerational dialogue, so we're really happy to have students present along with the rest of us to have that intergenerational dialogue, as well as all of the other inters that we do, interfaith, interracial, cultural, ethnic, etc. All of our connections. I want to welcome all the ministers who are here, all the elected officials who are here. Special welcome to State Representative Lisa Borowski, who is here. Judge Nichols. Judge Nichols is here, and she was a panelist a few years ago. A special welcome also to our Community Breakfast Collaborative Board of Directors. If you guys could wave, there's just 6 of us. And one had to be away. And our program keynote speakers, moderators, and panelists of the past 12 years, some of you are here, as well as the panelists and the moderator who are here for today's program. If you guys could give a wave. Any chance of that? All right, thank you. Now, I have a special thing I get to do today. Dr. Terry Nance, who is the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and the Chief Diversity Officer and a professor at Villanova University, is retiring in December. And Dr. Nance has been such a huge help to us at the Community Breakfast Collaborative. So I wanted to have a couple of notes here to keep me on track and not to get too emotional. But forming the Community Breakfast Collaborative in the community started as a very small steering committee, and from the very beginning to these later stages where now we're a nonprofit, but still extremely small nonprofit. Dr. Nance has been supportive to us the whole time. She's been supportive personally to me and helping us to become beloved community. What does that mean? What should that look like? The ground rules for dialogue that we're scrolling on the screens, I asked Dr. Nance for what could that be? What should we be using? How do we do the work that Dr. Nance is doing at Villanova and in the Villanova community and bring it to the larger community? And I want to say also that Dr. Nance also does other work in the community besides helping us, besides Villanova, at other schools and universities and in the community at large. So the impact of Dr. Nance in the greater area, and I don't even know how far, is just tremendous. And I was really hoping that she would be able to come today, but I didn't want her to have to get up so early. And so I didn't say anything. And then I looked on the registration and I saw that she was coming, because she usually comes. And one time at one program, Dr. Nance had the task after, I think this was when the Radnor High School students were being the presenter of the program. Dr. Nance had 5 minutes to sum up what everyone had said, and she did it. So I just want to honor Dr. Nance. I got a plant, a bromeliad, which is non-toxic to children and pets, and it has a nice flower. But if you could just come up so we could clap for you and recognize you, Dr. Nance.
If I could just say one thing, none of the things that have been attributed to me have I ever done by myself. The best part about being involved in equity work and justice work is that we do it in community. And as I look out in this audience right now, there are so many of you who have partnered with me on projects. And that's what I hope you will. I know I may be stopping from Villanova. I just am tired of getting up so early. But I have no intention of stopping this work, because it is life's work. And I look forward to perhaps meeting even more of you as my journey continues toward truly making this a community that is not only just and equitable, but ultimately the democratic promise of America. Thank you.
And now I'd like to introduce Reverend Alexis Washington, who will be giving us the opening prayer. And then I'll come back and introduce our moderator, Diana Robertson, and the panel for the program today.
Good morning. If we could all center ourselves. To the Creator, to our God, to the one who is unity, we come to you this morning embracing your presence and thanking you for the opportunity to break bread together one more time. So hear us, O Creator of the universe and of the uniqueness of ourselves. Be with us with our dialogues, that we can decrease and increase and amplify the voices that need to be heard to transform our hearts and our minds during this time. As we all give a collective amen.
There are some printed programs that you may have at your tables, but also if you use your phone and go to community breakfast at Weebly.com, you'll be able to pick up the open up the electronic program on the website. It brings you to the QR code would bring you to the main page, or you could just go to community breakfast at Weebly.com, communitybreakfast.weebly.com. and click on the PDF for the file for the printed program, and you'll see the program, which was actually compiled and designed by our moderator, Diana Robertson. Diana Robertson is also the secretary of the Community Breakfast Collaborative. And there is a very good write-up in the program about Diana. Diana is a paralegal, civil rights advocate, promoter for youth and education, writer, entrepreneur, as well as a grandmother, mother of 2 adult children and 1 son-in-law, and she's worked both professionally and as a volunteer for most of her life, serving the Main Line, Philadelphia, and other communities, both at her church, Zion Baptist Church of Ardmore, for 45 years, and through the NAACP Main Line branch for 36 years, and through the NAACP Pennsylvania State Conference for 25 years, and National Revolutions Committee 8 years. She has held a significant number of leadership roles. Additionally, she is the host of Have Your Say on Mainline TV, Mainline Network, and she serves on committees and boards of several organizations. She also serves as the secretary of the board of directors for the Community Breakfast Collaborative, and these are just some of the things that Diana does. I just want you to know that, because she is always busy. She is an inspiration, and I would like to call her my friend. I hope I can call her my friend. We've known each other for quite a number of years now, and Diana will be our moderator for today's program, Becoming the Beloved Community, a Work in Progress, and our guest panelists are Dr. George James, Reverend Angel Pagan Jr., and Dr. Lakeisha Thorpe. So I invite Diana to come up to be the moderator and our panelists to come up and settle in at the table, at the microphones. And just for some instructions before we get started, on each of your tables there's a zippy bag, a Ziploc bag, and if somebody could be in charge of that bag for today. There are pens in there. There are smaller white cards that you can write questions on. So if you have a question for the panel, if you just hold it up, write it out, and hold it up at your table, one of us will come and get it from you and bring it up here to Diana, and then she'll go through and gather, as you do as a moderator, gather the questions and present them to the panelists. There are also these larger pastel colored, a bunch of different color cards in the zippy bag too, and these are for you. If you want to make notes, if you want to write down a book that you're thinking about reading, if you want to take notes for today, for my students as you're getting ready to write up your ACS event review and you need to write down details about the event so you can write your essay, use this card for your own personal use, and it also will make a great bookmark. So it will remind you that you were here today, you're on a learning journey of racial justice. So that's what this index card is all about. So please use that, and we want to hear your questions for the panel, okay? And what we can do to become beloved community, because clearly we're all interested in that. That's why we're here today. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Diana.
Good morning. I know it's early. I'm not a morning person, so but we have an important topic to talk about. And so on August the 28th of 1963, approximately 240,000 people descended upon the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. This represented the largest protest that had taken place to date at that time. During that march, there will be many speeches given, but the one that will be last and most memorable is the 16-minute speech that was given by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on his dream. His I Have a Dream speech is still very much remembered today and still referenced today. As part of that speech, he talked about the beloved community. And he described the beloved community as he envisioned as a society based on justice, equal opportunity, and love of one's fellow human beings. The end is reconciliation. The end is redemption. The end is the creation of the beloved community. It is this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform opponents into friends. It is this type of understanding, goodwill, that will transform the deep gloom of the old age into the exuberant gladness of the new age. It is this love which will bring about miracles in the hearts of men. Today we will engage a panel to discuss how we may be able to move forward 60 years later to ultimately begin to achieve the beloved community. So we have Dr. George James, who is a clinical psychologist and head of CEO of George Talks. We have Reverend Angel Pagan, who is pastor of Lower Marion Baptist Church. And we have Dr. Lakeisha Thorpe, who has spent 16 years in higher education as an administrator and instructor, and she's done a lot of DEI work as well. So as we begin, I'm going to ask each one of you to take about 3 minutes to say a little bit more about yourselves and how you foresee this topic as being relevant today. And George, Dr. George, you can begin.
I knew that was going to happen as I sat in the seat. Everybody can hear me? Everybody hear me? Great. Yeah, it doesn't sound like
Is it on?
it might not be on yet. It's really early. Good morning. Everybody can hear me now? So first of all, I'm always excited and honored to be back here at Villanova, a place that I spent some time here as an undergrad, and somehow conveniently I am back here getting another degree as if I don't have enough. But Villanova has always been a place of home to be able to talk about important topics and to wrestle with important topics, which I think that we will do today. A little bit more about myself. I've been in the mental health field for over 20 plus years, working with individuals, couples, families, and businesses. My heart and passion is to really help people really expand and explore all the possibilities in both their career and business, as well as in their love, meaning their romantic lives and family life. And I try to help people not lose any one of those parts, not to have a good family life but bad career, or have a great career and not a good family life. And I've been fortunate to work with people from all different walks of life, from athletes, executives, to folks who are incarcerated. And it's been a privilege, and I've been able to take that to the public way by being on various media platforms to share the message. And there's a lot more that I can say about my work, and hopefully, today we'll share some of that. But when I think about is Dr. Martin Luther King's speech still relevant? I took some time to just reflect over the speech, and every time I see it, I read it, I'm challenged, I'm humbled, I'm overwhelmed, and I think that it is still relevant. And the first part of the speech really pushes us, and part of my work is to deal with the internal conflicts that we feel, to wrestle with the things that we might struggle with. I want to be a good father, but yet sometimes I might not show up the way I want to with my kids. I have to wrestle with that. I want to be a good husband, but yet sometimes I could be more thoughtful for my wife. I have to wrestle with that. And in Dr. King's speech, he talks about we have to wrestle as a country that there are things we say that we want to be as Americans, as the United States of America, but that we are not fulfilling that. And if we don't wrestle with that, we can't really create change. If we just ignore that the things we say, the things we have promised, that we're actually not living up to that, then we can't really move forward with change. And so the first part of the speech is really, let's look at ourselves. Let's look at ourselves as a country. What are we doing? And 60 years later, we still need to look at ourselves and imagine what's going on with us and think about that internal conflict. And the last part I'll say that I really admire about the speech, and there's so much more that I can add, is that the part that we say is, I have a dream that we think about, is really the latter part of the dream, latter part of the speech, really influenced by Mahalia Jackson, who said, "Tell him about the dream, King, tell him about the dream." And he goes in to say his aspirations, his belief, his hope. And today, some of his aspirations are very true, right? That sons and daughters of slaves and sons and daughters of former slave owners are friends, are sitting at the table. But at the same time, there are some people who are not able to read the same books, are not able to do the same curriculum that others have in this country. And so there's a lot more I think is very relevant, and I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. Can we hear me okay? Are we good? May just need to lean in. So thank you and good morning. I'm happy to be here with you to discuss these really important and yes, extremely still relevant issues. So a little bit about myself. As mentioned, I do have about 15, 16 years in higher education. I do teach here as adjunct in the evenings for the Masters of Education program. I have been invested in JEDI, DEI, EI, equity work pretty much my entire life, whether I was going to be an executive director as I am and a doctor as I am, or if I was going to be cleaning floors somewhere, I would still be as invested in this work because it is important to me as a person, just because I'm in a brown body and because I am a woman. It's important to me because I want everyone to feel welcomed in this space, regardless to what body you occupy, where it's come from, who your people are and who they aren't. You are meant to be welcomed in a space, and I work to make sure that people feel that, in particular students, and I'm really overjoyed to see you here, and it's so early, so I feel that. I really love that. I appreciate the community that's already been fostered in this room because it's something that I try to make sure I have in my classroom and that I have in my workspace. I'm currently an executive director at a nonprofit, and my title has the word culture in it. I'm responsible for our culture. I'm responsible for our strategy. I'm responsible for the development of our green businesses. But culture is the most important part to me. I want people at my place of business to feel comfortable coming to me to say, hey, something feels off. Hey, someone said something that I don't feel good about. Hey, I didn't really feel welcomed in this space. Well, let's work it because we are not perfect. Humans are perfectly troubled beings. And we are messy. So it's been my life's work to work on that mess and just lean into it. I make mistakes every day. It keeps life interesting. But it's the learning that's important, which is why cultural humility is so important to me and how I teach and how I carry myself and live my life. I got my doctorate, it was conferred in 2019, but I started working on it in 2014. And I was saying just at the table before we came up here, I was like, well, wait a minute, Obama's been president for a bit, everything feels okay. Maybe I don't have to do the diversity thing, maybe I'll do something else. And then 2015 hit and I said, okay, wow, okay. So I actually found myself ahead of the curve a little bit. Things that people were just figuring out, I had already spent years talking about, presenting about, researching, and I found myself in a great situation and that I was prepared to do the work, but what a terrible place to be in so many ways. Do I feel like Dr. King's speech is relevant? Yes and no. I'm gonna start with the yes first. Yes for everything the doctor just said before I began to speak. There are ideals within that speech that Dr. King brings up that we are still trying to achieve. And this community breakfast that we're having right now is a great example of that. We recognize, hey, we're still not quite there. The mountaintop, a place that seemed close, now seems much farther off for reasons that we would need a whole other panel to discuss. There's so much work to still do so that I can walk through the streets and feel safe in my body. I don't. And one thing that I love about the speech, but I don't love about the speech, is yes, it speaks very much to this is what we need to do as men, and this is what men need to do, but it's very patriarchal in its language. I am not included in that speech. Rights to my body are not included in that speech. My right to have a career, not have children, which I don't, is not included in that speech. And I think that we sometimes make the mistake of taking that speech and holding it up as foundation, but it of itself needs work to be relevant today. So there is an air about it that is completely relevant, but there is also an air about it that I feel like we need to almost go back and revise the speech. Much of it we're keeping, but much of it we need to add to. The diversity that we speak of often gets mixed up in black and white, black and white, black and white. It's not just black and white. And we need to be concerned about that too. It's not just skin color. You know, and even if we want to say black and white, black or white, we are not monolith. There are intersectionalities that speak to our diversity, that speak to our identity, be it gender, racial, socioeconomic, or otherwise. So yes, the speech is relevant, but please don't say, we talked about the speech today. I did a diversity thing. I'm good. You're not good. We're not good.
I'm Reverend Angel Pagan. I'm pastor at Lower Marion Baptist Church. I'm part of Power Mainline. I'm also the chair for Secate, which is the Community Center for Art Training and Education in Norristown. We work with immigrants, and we work with, it's an after-school program. So we're doing a lot of work in Norristown as well. I'm from the Bronx originally, so I'm not from this area, but I came out here in '96 when I was 21, and now you can do the math. I've been out here a lot longer. So you might not hear my New York accent as strong as it once was. But being a person born and raised in the Bronx, a brown person from the Bronx, there are things that I realize and recognize that I didn't realize. I thought it was normal. Actually, just the other day, me and my girlfriend were having a discussion about we were going to go to the store, and she was like, do I need to bring my wallet? And I said, well, at least bring your ID. You need to have your ID on you. And she was like, why? I was like, oh, you know what? We're coming from different worlds. Like, if I don't have my ID on me and I were to get stopped, like, it would be a lot more difficult than she, who is not brown, if she got stopped and didn't have an ID. And this is just the experiences I had in coming up in the Bronx, especially in the 70s and 80s, back when it was worse than a third world country. That's what President Jimmy Carter said. So growing up in the crack epidemic, it was a lot more difficult. So that's where my heart for justice comes from. It comes from this place of inequity and seeing, not only seeing, but experiencing and living in situations that were dangerous. And I don't want the next generations to live in that. And so when I think about his speech, Martin Luther King's speech, unfortunately, I have to say that it is relevant. And I say unfortunately, it's because we're 60 years on from this speech. And in the speech, he talks about it's 100 years from the Emancipation Proclamation. So you would think that 60% to the next 100 years, we would be a lot closer. And we're not. I think we've had moments of progress. And we had, like the sister said about, we had a black president. Wow, this is real progress. But after 8 years of President Obama and thinking that we're making progress, I think what it did was stir a lot of the muck that was at the bottom of the barrel. People and things that didn't want to let go and don't want to let go of power, because those in power will never let go of power. They will do everything they can to hold on. And so we're seeing the remnants of something that we thought we had been moving beyond. And it turns out that there's still so much of it that we're still stuck in the muck. And I think that when we talk about the dream in the speech, that's still what it is. It's a dream. And sometimes it turns into a nightmare. But it's still just a dream. And I think that's where we have to work. We have to work from making this just a dream, because it is, and we talked about this earlier, it's a great speech, but it's also representative of a moment in time. It's not about a movement. It's not about, I rather would talk about his later speeches or even his final speech that was a lot more relevant to where we are today. This was an amazing speech. It was a good sermon, but I think that we're still in the midst of it being just a dream, and we have to move it from the dream world into the reality so that it can become something that's a lot more relevant.
Okay, so Dr. James, so we're talking about the speech, we're talking about the parts that are relevant or not relevant. So the question now is, apart from the speech, and we're looking at the progress of just civil rights, 60 years after that march, what do you believe it is going to take to really capture and move us forward so that we're not, I feel like we take 5 steps forward, 3 steps backwards. What is it going to take to have some sustainability when it comes to really achieving civil rights, equity, true freedom?
First of all, I enjoy being on panels because you get to hear, hopefully, diversity of thought, and so I appreciate what you both just shared. And when I think about how do we move forward, I think the word civil rights or the phrase civil rights is used, but I think we have to define it and redefine it. What does that really mean? What does that mean right now? And I think to the point, who's included in that? Who are we thinking about when we think about civil rights? And from my perspective in my lane, I think about, unfortunately, it feels like there's a lack of just empathy. What does it mean to really care for somebody else? What does it mean to say that I want my family to be healthy and well and thrive, and to also have that hope and belief for another family? That there isn't sometimes this feeling that what I want in my life, I'm also hoping and believing that that is for other people. And therefore, I'm willing to treat them that way. I'm willing to give them access or be a part of supporting them or be a part of connecting with them, be a part of making sure that they're as well off or have opportunities just as my family might be. And I am also saying that about that what I think about what has happened is that my parents came from Jamaica, worked hard in this country, and didn't have a lot of education, but set me up to be where I am now, and I'm extremely grateful. I can look at a disparity between the life that I lived and my sister and her own children. And how do I support not only my sister, but other people that I'm connected to? Because I've been, even with all the things that I might experience in terms of racism and injustice, I've also experienced some privilege. And what do I do with that? And how do I use that in so many ways? So when I think about civil rights is that I have to take a full perspective and look at what are the things that I have, what are the opportunities, the levels of privilege and access, and what are the places where I might have no access or not or be denied. And then how do I think about other people? How do I think about my sister? How do I think about my neighbors? How do I think about my classmates? How do I think about other people? Because unfortunately, we become and have been very selfish. We only think about ourselves. We only think about what can I have in terms of power, what can I have in terms of wealth. And so for civil rights to really move forward, there's no way that, even when I think about the civil rights movement, it was not just all black people. It was not all one people from one corner of the world or one community. It was a community effort that people from all different walks, all different class levels, races, sexual orientation, identities, decided to come together. That's the only way that real change happens, is that it has to be a partnership with multiple people who have multiple thoughts and different backgrounds, who say that I believe in this and I'm willing to move forward, and they're not going to move forward by saying that I'm going to just think about myself and my family.
Okay.
I will start off by saying I'm also American Caribbean. My parents are from Barbados. I also grew up in New York. So there are a lot of commonalities just sitting here, but yet we're all very different people. I think one thing about the civil rights movement that we don't always discuss, or when we say civil rights, again, it turns very black-white, but it is more inclusive than that. You know, the Panthers marching upon, you know, the height of the time of the protests of the Vietnam War, and then you have Stonewall right after that. The intersectionalities of people, of individuals at that time, all raising their voices together to say this is not right. It's not civil rights, it is human rights. They were all human. And I think that for us to move forward, civil rights may not be the term anymore. And maybe human rights needs to be the term because, again, we are not monolith. Every one of you has a diverse identity. You are not just your uniform, you are not just your skin, you are not just your title. You are very diverse and complex, each and every one of you. Students, both middle school and college, you are not yet who you will become. And that person is complex. You are complex now, even if you're 10, even if you're 12, even if you're 21. You're complex. The amount of things that the civil rights movement and that civil rights fought for do not completely fight for me as a human, which is why I want it to be human rights. We do have to consider others. Another reason why it's human rights, because some of us are very privileged, and civil rights come as a birthright. It's not the same thing for everyone in the room, and I hope that you deeply understand that. Again, why I say human rights, because as you grow as an individual in this world, how your identity forms and who you become can very well dictate how many of those civil rights you get to keep. And how many you thought you had when you were, you know, fresh out of your mother's womb to who you are today. And we have to think about that. One thing that, you know, I always pull back on the 60s or pull back on King's movement is because it doesn't include women, because it still kind of wanted women to kind of do the at-home, have the kids, you know, back up the man thing. I'm not saying that that's bad. And if you did that, bless you, because children are wonderful fathers. Wonderful fathers. You're wonderful. But it's not for everyone. So I always struggle to find my voice in that. So that's why, again, I say it has to be a human rights effort. It has to consider all of us, regardless of where we are on that journey, regardless to how complex or simple we are.
Complex is a good word. Growing up, my family is Puerto Rican. I was born and raised in New York, and we call ourselves New Yorkers because we're stuck in the middle. So we were too Puerto Rican to be American, and then we go to Puerto Rico, and we were too American to be Puerto Rican. And so I grew up in that middle, not understanding or not knowing, like, what was I? So we created a New Yorican culture, which is like the best of both worlds. And that's when she's talking about complexity. That's part of what I grew up in that complexness of life. And I think we all grow up in the middle somehow, some way. We all are in the midst of different things. And for those of us who are aware of justice and wanting and thinking about civil rights, you are in the middle. And you're stuck because there's this part of you that wants to fight for justice. And then you're like, well, I don't know how. So then you find Martin Luther King, you find the Malcolm X's, you find these people who were fighting, and then you find organizations and people today who are fighting. And then you start to absorb this, and then you're still with where you were from and what you were going through, but now you're discovering this new thing. So now you start to understand a little better what it means to have civil rights, rights that were inalienable or should be. should be. Because for some, they were very alien. They weren't even in existence. Some people weren't born full humans according to this same freedom, this same declaration, this same constitution that claims to give freedom to all didn't count all as human. And so even from our basis, from our very foundation as a nation, we already had this iniquity. It wasn't the same for everyone. And so now I think we need to, as our society today has grown a lot more complex, has grown a lot more diverse, has grown in so many different ways, there are things that we need to reflect upon. As a nation, as a city, as a state, as a community, we need to sit back and just study and understand, well, what are we built upon? We're already built upon iniquity. We're already slanted. And we're wondering, why is everything lopsided? Well, we're built upon a foundation that was already lopsided. So the building that you build upon it, guess what? It's going to be crooked. I think it's time that we take a step back and maybe look at that foundation and understand the good meaning behind a lot of it and how important it was, but also how do we evolve and grow and allow this thing that we call justice to really take hold so that we can start to balance out the inequities that we live in our society today that was from its very foundations.
Okay. I just want to remind everybody as you're listening to the comments, please feel free to write questions on your cards because we want to hear from you as well. Okay, here is a question from the audience. Can you comment on the current book bans and the resistance to teaching a full and accurate history?
Is that any of us?
Yeah, sure.
So I'll just say that education is just, it's such a privilege, right? There's so many people in this country that, regardless of a book ban, don't have access to books or contemporary or current information, that they are receiving information that is extremely dated. And sometimes we don't even have to go too far to see that disparity. And I think about my own experience of things that I've learned just by something I read or heard. I think about my children and things that I learned because of them, of what they're reading. Like a few years ago, I learned that Goldilocks and the Three Bears is really not only the way that I learned it, but it's actually in multiple cultures, and there's an African version of that. I did not know that growing up. I didn't know that that story has many links to so many different backgrounds and cultures and identities. I only learned one version of that. But I learned that through my kids and their ability to read and to know things. So when I think about restricting anyone and any community from learning and reading and going back to what I said before and wrestling with what comes up with us, I had to deeply wrestle with what it means to be a man, a privileged heterosexual man in this world when I read books around sexual assault and violence. I had to wrestle with, that's not me, that's not how I present myself. But I also had to understand that there were other men that look like me and don't look like me that have hurt and harmed women. That was hard. But because I wrestled with that, that also helped shape my identity and shape the things I say and the way I want to show up in the world. If we are not reading, if we don't have opportunities, then we don't wrestle. If we don't wrestle, then we don't make conscious choices. And we repeat patterns, behaviors, thoughts that we see in our families, in our communities, that maybe we need to wrestle. There were some things about Jamaican culture that I love. I am a proud member of the Jamaican community, and I will rep Jamaica anywhere and everywhere. But I still had to wrestle with parts of the culture that doesn't represent who I am right now. And so if we, in my opinion, if we really push back on and restrict people for what they can read, we don't allow people to really be their full selves and wrestle for what they could eventually develop to be.
You wouldn't know it to look at me today, but I have like 15 tattoos, and one of them is Sankofa, and it's a West African symbol that means to know your future, you must know your past. When we read the past, okay? And when I was a little girl, I can just remember, like, reading Rainbow. Anybody else with me? Reading Rainbow, LeVar Butterflies in the Sky, like that. Oh my goodness, like, I get excited just thinking about it. The amount of, it was literally like the worlds he was opening up every time he talked about a book. I was like, oh my goodness, like this is amazing. And to go to the library and, all right, now I'm gonna date myself really, go with the little card catalog,
Yeah.
look up the little index cards, some of you really know what I'm talking about here,
Yep.
follow the numbers, you know, and find it. Or for today's kids, Google, AI, Claude, ChatGPT, Wikipedia. Please don't use Wikipedia in your papers. Looking up that information now, just having access to that. I don't know why I thought when I was an undergrad and I finished my bachelor's, I was like, I'm done. That's all the education I needed. I don't know why I even thought that for a second. If I go back over my life, there's no question I was going to be a PhD because I literally just got to read books and research and learn and go down rabbit holes. And like 1 minute you're looking up something, you know, on YouTube that's very powerful, and then you're watching someone try to put a jacket on a giraffe. But that's like the joy of research. That it takes you to these places that you didn't expect. And we're laughing and you're feeling what I'm saying. Why would we stop people from doing that? What is it that they so desperately don't want you to know? What is it that they're so desperate to keep from you? Is it really a problem that there's a book that's like Milo and his two mommies? Is for colored girls, is that a problem? Should we not be reading that? Should we not read The Bell Jar? Is Sylvia Plath not still an amazing writer for what she did in her time? What is it that they don't want you to know is always my question when we talk about banning anything. Because our history is not clean, okay? Our history is troubled. But if we do not know it, if we don't understand it, first of all, there are things that have happened that I don't want to see happen again. I don't want holocausts. I don't want persecutions. I don't want slavery. I don't want rape and pain and these horrible things to happen again. And if we don't learn about what a horrible thing did and how horrible it was and to whom it was horrible and painful, then we're destined to keep repeating and keep hurting and keep not learning. And that is not life to me. That is not life. So whenever someone says banning anything, banning books, why? What is it that they so desperately do not want you to know?
I think one of the major things it comes down to is fear. And coming from a faith perspective, the strongest faith is faith that has been through the storms. It's faith that has been shaken. It's faith that has gone through a lot. If you've never had any trouble in your life, and you're like, my faith is strong, and then a storm comes, and you're like, oh my God, why me? Why am I going through this? Meanwhile, those of us who have been through storms are like, it's a storm. Like, you're going to go through it. Like, just put your head down and keep on walking. Like, that's how you grow. It's through the difficult moments. And for me, when someone is saying, I want to ban this, or we can't read that, there's a fear. What are you afraid of? Like, the more you know, the more you understand. And if what I've learned is good and what it needs to be, then it doesn't matter the things that I read or the things that I learn, because I'll be standing on what I already know. But now I'll have an understanding of another side, another perspective. So I think it's fear that you might get pointed out for your weak faith or your weak understanding of something, your racist way. I think that's where it comes from. It's a fear that I don't want people to know that I'm racist or I'm bigoted or I'm cheating or I'm doing this, so I'm going to fight to ban these things so that they can't understand, they can't see what I'm doing. And I think that's where we need to understand, like, because education of all sorts, learning in all directions is always good. because it confirms what you already know if what you know is right, or it helps you to see a perspective that maybe you didn't understand, and then maybe it allows you to see your neighbor's side of things, so that it's just not like I'm judging you because of where I'm from and what I understand, but now I'm walking with you because now I understand who you are and what you've been through because of the education and learning that I've gone through, the books that I've read, the conversations that I've had, the mind-opening situations that I've seen. Now I can understand your perspective from a different place in my life. I'm not judging you from my ivory tower. I'm understanding from being in the rut with you, from helping you in the foxhole, from helping you to stand up when you've fallen. And I think that changes the whole perspective. So for me, it's a sense of fear that what I believe might not be good enough or might not be right. So let's ban these things and not let them read it so that they can just think that they are right and that's it.
Okay. All right. To what extent do you think education is a starting point? We need to make education equitable in Pennsylvania. Can we have an era of building new public schools in Pennsylvania and move toward the beloved community?
I think education is the key, because if you're an idiot, then you're just always going to be an idiot. If you don't want to know or you don't want to learn, then you're always going to be stuck in that. But I think that everyone should have the opportunity to know and to learn and to be able to understand. And yes, I think that the saddest part of even our fiscal years in government and when they're fighting over the budget is that the first thing they cut is education. And like our federal budget has like 50% of our budget is military, and then we have like 2% education. Well, what if we cut it to 48% military and added another 2% to education? Like, what if we did that? Would that really change, so much the military complex? No, it wouldn't. But it could change our education system completely because we're talking about trillions of dollars. And I think that that's where we need to get. We need to get to a place where public education is just as good or better than private education, because most of the kids in our society today can't afford to go to private school. There are those who can and they're privileged, but most of us can't. I remember growing up, I was in elementary school and junior high in the 80s, so you can do the math with that. But I remember having textbooks that didn't even talk about the civil rights movement because it ended in 1960. So they were already 20 plus years old when we were reading it, and it called black people Negroes, and I was like, what in the world? This is our textbook, and this is in 7th grade. I'm like, what in the world is this? I think if we were to invest in our education system in the United States and start there, and it's not about indoctrination. There are a lot of key phrases that are thrown around by certain sides that is very frustrating, because things that shouldn't be are being thrown around like they are and that like they're true. But if we educate and we allow our children to understand and to grow and to see the perspectives from all sides, they'll understand better and they can throw these things aside, because it's not about indoctrination and whatever else they want to throw out there. It's about opening your mind and understanding the perspectives of all who are around you.
Okay.
Education is literally everything. Students, regardless of where you are in your academic journey, I'm so glad to see you at an event like this. And I am really, really proud of you. Honest to God, I am. I always tell my students, y'all are why I get up in the morning. Yeah, I got a job, yeah. But y'all are why I get up in the morning. I can be so tired, so exhausted, so stressed out, but the second I'm in the classroom, I'm just there for y'all. And it makes my heart feel so good to do that. And I was privileged growing up. I went to private school. My parents, coming from Barbados, wanted their kid to have every opportunity, every turn. And my mother would always say to me, I'm doing this for you because nobody did it for me, because it wasn't possible for me. I'm doing this for you. And I was so happy to watch her get her degree right after I got mine, and to watch her excel. And my father, becoming a nurse and doing everything that they did. So I was privileged in that way. In my house, education was top. No matter else what I wanted to do, education came first. Can I go outside and play? Where's your homework? Can I go do this? How was your test scores? Can I have the new Nintendo? If you get an A. Okay, it was everything in my household. And it's so important, those lessons that I learned. The idea that we have kids who might be learning something so skewed like slavery was good for black people is tremendously disconcerting to me. And how does it connect to how we are when we're adults? Again, it's about not understanding history. And regardless to what topic we're talking about, what subject, what discipline, it's all history, because we're talking about what happened. You don't get in a classroom, turn on CNN or MSNBC or Fox and say, okay, what's happening right this second, let's talk about it. But even if you are, it's still history, because it had to have happened for it to be on the news. So why do we think we can discredit what happened 400 years ago, 100 years ago, 60 years ago? We have to tell the truth. We have to be clear about that. So education can pull us out of the darkest hole if it is equitable, if it is inclusive, and if it is accurately discussing what happened.
When I think about education, I mentioned about my parents who came from Jamaica. My mother didn't pass the 8th grade, and my father could barely read. He actually couldn't read. And I would hear their struggles with what that meant for them in their careers. My mother at that time was a nurse's aide, patient care associate, but she could have become a nurse with even just a high school diploma. That would have really shaped her life differently. Not just what she could have earned, but everyone would say to her, wow, you're so great with your patients, you're so great with the people, you show so much care, you should really be a nurse. Even in her own identity, that would have shaped how she would have showed up, just by a few more years. And she tried to take her GED, and she didn't pass, and she said she was gonna go back. And there's some theory out there that maybe she didn't go back because she was raising somebody here. It took up most of her time to be able to do that. But I think about how relevant that was, and they're, very similar, the message of education. I mean, there's nothing, if you read 2 seconds in my bio, you will see that I've been in school for a very long time. And somehow I am back in school. And so I believe in formal education, but I also believe in education from all different ways. That you don't necessarily have to learn in the classroom. Yes, go to the classroom, get good grades, but there's so many ways we can learn outside of it. For us, even in our family, that has been through travel. That has been through being able to see different parts of the world. I remember having a conversation with someone and said that they worked with some folks, some young folks in Camden, and that they at that time, have never been to Center City. Camden, when they could look across and see the bridge and see Philly, never had an experience to actually come into the city. So exposure is another level of education. But once again, that comes back to class and access and privilege, and what are we doing to be able to support that? That I'm thankful that I can do that for my own children, but there's some children that have never been on a plane, do not have a passport. And so when I think about education, there's so many ways that we can learn and develop and grow, and to have access to all of those things, to current books, to having all access to any type of book, to being able to say that I want to be able to explore and learn about cultures and identities and people and history by actually going to those places and being in those situations and learning about what people experienced during that time. That there's education that can happen. And we even see that there's a lack of things that growing up, don't ask me to go fix your car. That is not the thing you want me to do. I will help you with your relationship. I will help you thrive. Don't ask me to fix your car. But that's even another form of education, of learning things that we've seen, unfortunately, over years has been dwindling. There's so many things that we can learn if we allow ourselves. And I just think about education on the whole, that we should do it and get as much as we can.
Okay. All right, the questions are pouring in. So that we can try to get through most of the, I'm going to read a question, and then I'm going to ask one of you to see if you can, who wants to answer it. Okay. How do we fix relationships between the police and black and brown communities?
All right, I'll go quick and then you can add.
You got a tag team it.
So I'm just going to add to what I've said before, right? It's important that you have examples that allow you to know the differences, right? I have examples in my family or friends or community where I know some folks who went to the military, I know some folks who are police officers, I know some people who honor the country and have served the country. I also know some people who have had experiences where because of the color of their skin or because of the way that they show up, that they have been asked questions and treated unfairly by folks who are in those particular positions. And so if we just say, based off of only one experience, we will think about that for everybody, and we see that. And so relationship is, once again, connection and opportunity. How are we allowing, I have a friend who started a program in Baltimore called Project Numa. What they do is with new recruits and cadets in the police force, they are at the same time in an after-school program with young black and brown kids, and they're learning how to work together. They're doing exercises, they're doing yoga, and it shapes them years later. Oh, I know that young man. I'm not going to treat that person. I know that young woman. I'm not going to treat her a particular way because I have relationship with her or with him. And so relationships significantly shape how we treat people in situations. Because I have a relationship with you, I might not harm you. I might ask a question. Or I might not judge you. I might ask a question.
Yes. Yes to all that. To my officers, for you serving, first of all, I appreciate you because you do a job I would not want to. I want to start with that. And I do recognize that. But I fear you. And that's just the plain truth of it. I am an extremely law-abiding citizen. If my inspection is even 2 hours out, I'm like, I have to get to the mechanic. You know, I don't like things to not be in compliance. It's part of who I am as a person. It's part of my work. But I fear you nonetheless, because there are too many people who look like me, who were like me, going about their daily business and didn't make it home that night. My objective every morning is to come back to that bed, not just because I love sleep, but also because I have family, I have friends who I love dearly. I want to see them thrive. I want to be a part of their lives because I love them as humans. And I think sometimes we forget that. We get very caught up in, this is my role, this is my job, this is the law, and things get skewed so quickly. And I don't want any of you to not make it home to your family, because you're human. You're people. You have people that you love too. So whenever I interact with a police officer, my first thought in my head is, I just want us both to go home tonight, and I want it to be okay. It hasn't happened often, all right? And as I said, I am a law-abiding citizen in every way that I possibly can be. But the palpitation, the sweat, the instant fear, the oh my God. I was driving in Bethlehem during Music Fest, and Bethlehem is in Lehigh Valley. It's like an hour and change from here. And there was a checkpoint. I hadn't been drinking that night. I had no reason to be nervous. I have nothing in my car. I have no intention to do harm. I was almost like immobilized with fear. And some of that is the news and social media, and you just see it over and over again, but it's also a lived experience for a black person. So I don't know if you know those things, if those things have been said to you, if you've been made to understand them, but understand that there are times when the fear is mutual. Y'all want to go home? I want to go home. Can we just talk? Okay, can we just talk? So when you are going about your day doing your job, and I pray you safety every day that you do it, can you remember we want to talk and we want to understand. Now, I know that there are bad people of all color out there. There are people that, unfortunately, it does require you to do things that you hope you don't have to do. And I pray you don't see that either. This world is messy and troubled, but we're humans and we want to talk, so can we start there? I think that's what we need to try to understand.
I think one perspective is community policing. I think if you know the people in your community and they know you, I think that helps to build relationship. And if you're building relationship, then it's not some colored kid, some black kid, some Latino kid. It's, oh, that's Mikey. Oh, that's Steven. Like, where's your mom? Why are you doing this? Like, it changes the perspective. And also the importance of, from the police side, to want to be a part of that community. You can't come into a community as an overseer and expect to be treated as one of the community, but if you come in and want to become one with the community, then you can be one. But if you're just coming in for work, if it's just a job, and you're coming in and overseeing, and then, so you're going to get that fear. You're going to receive that hate. You're going to, because you're living out in a way that the things that we see or we believe police to be. But if you come in as a mentor, as a community leader, as one who not only sees and knows you, but they see and know you as well, then that changes the whole perspective. And so, and this is coming from one, like my family, they were either NYPD or they married NYPD, like across the board. I have family from all, like in all different parts of NYPD. My brother just retired 26 years as a sergeant. So it's like, so I'm coming from a perspective where I understand the side of the police because I've heard it. And I've heard the stuff that you had to go through and the stuff that like they had to go through. I had one of my uncles was a detective who was undercover for months. We didn't know where he was. And then one Christmas, this Jewish looking guy shows up at our door, and it was my uncle who was undercover as like a Jewish drug dealer. and so we were afraid for him, but he came finally after months and we got to see him. So we understand, I understand from a personal perspective, the fear of not having your brother come home, or not having your uncle come home, or not having your aunt come home. Like, I understand that. But they were intentional, a lot of them were, in being community police. They knew the kids in their neighborhood. The kids knew them. They knew the corner store owners and the people who came in. And so it was different than just driving around and watching people. It was getting out of the car, walking the neighborhood, and saying, hey, Miss Pollard, hey, saying hello, saying hi, getting to know them, and you getting to know the community as well.
Okay, I'll try this again with one.
Oh, yeah, one, I'm sorry. We're sorry.
We got a lot to say.
I know.
All right, so you got to name us.
Okay.
Close out.
All right. The Supreme Court has ruled against affirmative action in college admissions. What are the implications of this for the rest of society?
It's nonsense. It's nonsense. Listen, affirmative action, I've sat in higher education. I've had admissions files on my desk. Never did I say, well, that's a black kid? Well, he's in. That's a white kid? Nope. That's an Asian kid? Nope. That's not, if you're doing that, you shouldn't be doing it, okay? That is wrong, plain and simple. Affirmative action is supposed to say, hey, just make sure that if you have 30,000 kids that you're bringing in, like 10, 15%, just make sure there's a few that are different. Make sure there's a little diversity. But never has it meant, and never should it mean, that I'm going to admit someone or I'm going to hire someone who is not up to snuff, because that is incorrect. I had to fight for every bit of my academic progress. Okay, I was a 4.0 student during my PhD because I understood the importance and money is real. But there were times as an undergrad I messed around. I didn't go to class. It was, I'm tired. I don't feel good. I was out, doing stuff the night before. I don't feel like it. You play around, but when you get older, you start to take that really seriously. And I did. But I remember sitting next to people who didn't. But I was the one that shouldn't be there because I am not good enough. Because I probably got in because of affirmative action. But I have really good grades and you don't. So if we're gonna base it just on grades, then who does belong? Affirmative action, again, is just meant to make sure that there is diversity in the incoming class every year. And if you don't have substantial diversity in your incoming class, your admissions and enrollment office has some explaining to do. Where are they recruiting? Where are they going? What do your brochures look like? What does your marketing look like? Can I look at those brochures and feel like I want to be a part of the institution? Because I'm not even going to apply either way for student or for career purposes to that institution. I pull up Villanova's website. One of the first things I see is a young black woman. She's writing on the board and it looks like she's talking to people. There's nice diversity within the pictures. When I walk around campus, I think it about balances what I see, but those are snippets. Okay, so every year there's something called iPads. Higher ed institutions have to fill that out. Check out iPads. See what the diversity is on your campus. Actually see, not just what you experience, actually see. See where those numbers are. Look at your faculty. Look at your staff. Where is that? Where is that? Because I've taught at institutions where there may be 6 of us teaching and there are 2,000 students. And you know what happens? You get a bunch of students coming to your office telling you how racist and how painful it is on campus. And then you have to fight for them. And I did it gladly and I'd do it again. But that's not the way it should be. Okay, that's not the way it should be. My administration told me that I was paying a black tax. Sorry about that, but you're paying a back tax. That's not a reasonable explanation. So there were reasons for affirmative action, okay? And the fact that it is gone is nonsense.
Okay. How is our lack of empathy related to our increased need for social economic stability? George.
So I've mentioned about empathy, and some of the work to get to empathy is by being willing to really do a self-examination. And unfortunately, without paying attention to that, we miss out on the things that we might need to work on, not only within our families, but within our community. And so the second part of the question, I want to make sure I address that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see. Lack of empathy related to our increased need for socio-economic stability.
Yeah, so once again, I start off by sharing just the disparity. My sister has lived in Florida, in the Miami area in particular, and didn't have the same level of education and had some other challenges. And so when I think about the intersection of class and race, and how sometimes we do look at race, but we're not looking at class. We're not looking at opportunities, and how just because of how much income you have or don't have, that can really create some challenges. So what does empathy look like? What does it mean to be able to say within my own family, to say, what can I do for my niece and nephew? How can I make sure that they have opportunities? How can I think about what are the things that they're not getting, or what are the things that they might need to have access to? As a society, as a community here, there are students, there are folks that are just down the street that we're not thinking about what are the things that they may need. Are we volunteering at certain organizations? Are we providing resources? Are we building a foundation that now might create or provide books or opportunities or internships? That one internship can literally change the course of that family. But if you're not providing the internship and thinking about who has access to that internship, that can make a big difference. If it's just being a student here, if it's only the sons and daughters of the president or CFO or whomever has access to that internship, the friend that they're going to school with or playing basketball with on this campus does not have that opportunity. To me, empathy is being able to realize I need to look out for my children, I need to look out for my family, but I need to look out for other people that might not look the way that I look or have the same amount of resources that I have. And in doing that, and using that level of empathy, I can actually shift what happens. I can experience that shift in my life versus my sister. And all of that is because of the opportunities that I had and people who provided empathy. One of those individuals, Dr. Nance, being in this room, that allowed me to have a full ride here at this university versus my sister who didn't get a chance to go to college. Two different, family-related, but empathy and creating opportunities can make a difference.
Okay, Reverend Angel, do well-funded school communities have a moral responsibility to fight for those with fewer resources?
So well-funded communities are, can you read it again?
Yeah, do well-funded school communities have a moral responsibility to fight for those with fewer resources?
I think yes. I don't think that that they're responsible for all of making sure everyone gets the same, but I think it is their responsibility to understand their privilege and where they are, and to understand that not everyone is in the same boat as they are. And therefore, they should do what they can to help the communities that are in need. That can mean different things. That can mean allowing the opportunity for those who excel in Black and brown communities to come to their schools, or to maybe take less funding and allow that funding to go to where it's more needed. I don't think that public schools need to have an endowment, but if they do have something like that, then I think that it is their responsibility to share that, because we live in a society that's in need. Like the rich is getting richer, and the poor is getting poorer. We're at a point in history where the discrepancy is ridiculous. And we've seen it in our history, as my sister was saying, that history tells us where we were. Mm-hmm. And when we look at things like the French Revolution, it was because of that discrepancy. The rich had more, the poor had even less. But we're at like 10 or 100 times what it was at that point, where the rich 1% makes more than the 99%. And I think that this is, even though that's a broader perspective, but I think that schools and school districts that are and able to have everything they have should be able to share the wealth and allow schools that don't have or are underfunded to have some of what they have, to share that funding, to allow the students who unfortunately always wind up being Black and brown, they suffer more. And so if they're able to receive some of that funding, that I think it'll help them to get more to the level where they need to be, so that affirmative action isn't needed. Mm-hmm. So if I think that was always the goal, right?
Right.
To allow the funding to go across the board, so that we get to a day where it isn't needed. It was taken away, even though it's still needed. Mm-hmm. But that was your question. I'm sorry. So yes, I think that they do have a responsibility of sharing from what they get.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay. So, in your view, what are 3 facts you can mention that improved racial issues in the United States in the past 20 years? Who wants to take that? George.
You see how we were all stumped? We're like, I don't know. I don't know if we can get to 3.
I don't know. I think one each. Maybe we could do one each, yeah. I think that's what we're going to try to do. Just
one.
All right, wait, reread the question one more time.
Oh, in your, in your view, what are 3 facts you can mention that improved racial issues in the United States in the past 20 years?
I really, I'm struggling with this because when I look at our current just climate, I don't know if those things have been improved, right? Like, I have to say, right, like, yes, where I am able to live and what I'm able to do as a profession, there were lots of things that happened to set that up. There were people that were put in place. When I mentioned Dr. Nance, who has been an extreme advocate on this campus, and with others like Dr. Kada and Dr. Lucky, who were intentional about saying, regardless of whether affirmative action or not, we're going to create a path to let some amazing, talented black and brown folks of color come through this campus, and we believe in them. And the late Dr. Collymore, who was here, who even when I wasn't living up to the dream, he would say, come, close the door. and he would have a conversation with me. So I think about the people who have stood at the door to make sure that it does not get shut and allowed me to walk in. And I think about folks like Dr. Nance, Dr. Kada, Dr. Lucky, Dr. Collymore on this campus who made sure I could walk through the door and has allowed opportunities for me that now I can pave the way for others. So that would be my one thing, the people who stood in the door to make sure it didn't get shut in my face.
So as our time is getting short here, I'm going to ask each of you to make closing remarks as to what you want to leave as a food for thought for everybody. But I just want to mention something first. The last night I was having a conversation with two black guys that it was in a business setting, and so I did not know them until, I saw them and at that moment, and we got into a conversation. And one of the things that was very disturbing to me was that they were probably guys in their 20s. And one of the things, what they talked about as far as their future, they didn't really have any hope for things changing. And that was very sad for me to hear. And, so as part of your concluding remarks, if you could leave something, but what is your dream as part of your closing remarks? Now, y'all can speak on this.
Just trying not to, I want everyone to have an opportunity. So I'm going to combine the last question with this question, because actually in my head that works. The desegregation of educational institutions is my one thing. If not for that, I wouldn't be able to do the work that I've done. My role in higher ed, my role now as a nonprofit executive director, I want people to have what I didn't. And that's my hope. And I'm not saying that I am the only one who can do that, but there's so many of us now that are saying, I didn't have that, I want to make sure you had it. Or like in your case, people really were there for me, and I know how to show up for other folks. That is the hope, that we are here and we are doing the work and we're invested. We did not get to where we are as a society with one ethnicity or one identity or one racial identity. It's been all of us together. And I think if there are enough of us that are focused on hope and focused on the better, we can provide that. What I want to see in the future, I've had students, young women, black women, who are also Caribbean Americans, say to me, like, you're a unicorn to me. I don't know any other black women with a PhD. Well, let's stop that. Let's stop that. So there's a future and there's a hope there, and it's not easy, but that's what my closing remarks are. Like, please keep focusing on that hope. Things are very difficult, but it's not impossible. And your voice is your vote. Your vote is your voice. Make sure those of you that are able and can, that you are registered and you are doing something. It's part of the hope. Don't let this work be in vain.
So I'm just honored to be here. Grateful for the conversation and my fellow panelists and moderator and just this forum. When I think about everything, what I hope to offer or to leave is the importance of mental wellness. I just had to do an interview yesterday that Gen Z, 12 to 26, is more willing to talk about their mental health challenges and mental health needs than other generations. And it might seem like, oh, they're saying like, oh, we have more struggles than others, but I think other generations, including myself, Gen X, didn't really openly admit that we struggle or we have issues. We were told that we got to push through it, which was great in terms of resilience, but we didn't talk about our anxiety and our depression. And that when we talk about racism, that causes lots of anxiety. When we talk about injustice, that causes lots of depression. And so our ability to talk about mental health and mental wellness in the fight, in the struggle, in overcoming some of the things that we're talking about is so important. And so my hope is that we will be able to integrate mental wellness in more spaces, which is a part of my mission, not only in the workplace, not only on campus, but in businesses, in media, in all these places where we are talking and providing resources, tools, images that people can see and integrate that mental health and mental wellness and mental well-being is important and should be a part of every conversation as we are talking about injustice that we face.
Going back to where we started with I Have a Dream, part of the speech says, we cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro in Mississippi cannot vote, and the Negro in New York believes he has nothing to vote for. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls like waters and righteousness like the mighty stream. And that's actually a direct quote from Amos 5:24 that says, but let justice roll down like water and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. In the midst of all the darkness and all the difficulty, that we go through personally and that we go through as a society and we go through as, different groups of people, there's a funny thing about hope. There's always a spark of hope. And that little spark always pushes us through. Whether, like I said, it's a personal storm, whether it's a cultural one, whether it's a societal one, there's always a spark, and a spark can light a fire, and a fire can light a huge fire. And that's where we are. We are in the midst of that spark. And that spark is moving from this thing called I have a dream to making it I have a reality. I think that more than anything, for Martin Luther King, his hope was that it didn't remain a dream. It didn't remain something that might come someday but might not, but that's something that can become a reality. And I think that we here today are part of that spark, and we here today can light that fire, and we here today can move that from a dream into reality. But it's gonna take work. It's been 60 years and we haven't progressed as far as we should. Let's not wait another 60 years to progress another step or two. Let's work to get this done, to move the dream of this man in 1963 to a reality here in 2023.
Thank you so much. There were a few questions that we still have left that we didn't get to respond to, but I'm going to send them to our panelists so that they can get responses and we can put it up on our website so that you can see how they responded to this. And my final remarks, I just want to say that for me, working in a way that helps give people hope, helps them to find the resources, helps them to understand that they do have rights, actually has become a lifestyle for me. And so I think hopefully today, after all that you've heard, you will think about in the work you do or when you're someplace that someone speaks, as I said yesterday, about not having any hope, you process it in a way to let people know that you can have hope. And that even though there might be a lot of things that still need to be fixed, that if we all start to work together and we come together, and where you don't know what to do, then those who are doing certain things, you partner with them. And you come together and work in such a way that if we move as they did in the march, arm in arm, and we can move forward. We can actually resolve some of these issues in a way that we all are able to experience the freedom that God made us to be able to experience as human beings. Thank you.
I'm coming up here to partner with you.
Okay.
I want to thank everybody for coming. I did not get an opportunity to recognize the police officers who made a real effort to come here today. We have police officers from Villanova University, from Radnor Township, and from Lower Marion Township. Not exactly the same, but special. We do have Police Officer Taffy here from Villanova University. So I just want to let you know that in case you want to meet Taffy. And as far as finishing up today, I would love it if my students came up and did a picture up here. The middle school students who are here also, anybody who wants to take a photograph up here by the flag and by the banner, that would be great. We have a literature table on the side here, so as well as the literature that's on the website of suggested reading, recommended reading from Colin McCrossan, who had been our scholar in residence, and from Dr. Nishikawa, put together a fantastic list that's on our website of further reading that you can do. And thank you all very much for coming. I'm going to think about that spark. Thank you to our panelists. Let's just give them another hand. And Diana. And you can also come up to the front of the room and talk with our panelists and with our moderator. And our board members from the Community Breakfast Collaborative will be around too. Next year will be September 18th, same place, same early time. That'll be our 14th Undoing Racism Day. We'll keep working. You know, it's difficult that we need to continue to do this work, but it is a joy to know that we're right on the edge. We're with the spark, we're working with hope, and we're partnering together. So keeping that in mind, I hope that we can accomplish things together. Thank you very much.